Yeah, good afternoon and welcome to the fourth Forum Salt&Light in Davos 2025. A special welcome, Mr. Pedro David Espinoza. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking time to join us today. It's an honor to having you here. And of course, I extend my welcome to all the guests and the guests on the chat and the stream. Welcome, everybody. So my name is Markus Reichenbach. I work at the University of the Nation, a Christian university in the whole world. So it's a privilege to host you this afternoon. So we operate here under the name Salt and Light and reflecting our Christian mandate to be a positive influence in the world. And so the name says we should be a salt and light in the world. Now I would like to introduce Mr. Espinoza to you. Pedro David Espinoza is a TED speaker, entrepreneur, AI investor, and author. In 2014, Pedro became the founder and CEO of Smiley Go. I hope it's right. Smiley Go, an app that helps companies invest smarter. In 2017, he was awarded in the University of California as Entrepreneur Winner. In 2021, the Silicon Valley Business Journey recognized him as a Latin Business Leadership Honoree. And a lot more. The list is long. I cannot mention everything. Sorry about that. But it's really great that you are here.
Marcus, thank you so much for having me. And hello, everyone. It's such an honor. And, praise God that we're able to here to just break bread together and open this dialogue. I want to learn as much from you as you're learning from both of us here.
Thank you very much. So we have a few questions to you. And then, of course, after that, the audience is also allowed to ask questions. So please have your questions ready. Our question to you will focus on the theme of being salt and light, faith at work, and your unique professional journey. So my first question, also living your Christian faith in high pressure environment. You held influential position in the world. So how do you navigate being salt and light in high pressure environments? Where ethical dilemmas and compromises are often the norm. So how do you do that?
That's an excellent question, Marcus. So first of all, it's such an honor and joy to see everyone. I hope everyone's doing great. And we have people from all over the world, or are you guys from the Schweiz, like Switzerland only? All the world.
Also, we represent all the continents, but not South America.
Oh, there you go.
But with you together, we are the whole world.
There you go. No, Alfonso speaks Spanish too, so Anyway, so great question, Marcus. For those of you that don't know, I live in San Francisco in the Bay Area. It is the least churched place in the U.S. What do I mean by least church? It's like very, very few people are devout Christians or attend, not only church Sunday mornings, but also serve in the community, right? Die Gemeinde. It's important not to just be a Sunday observer of Mass or sermon or message, but actually serve. And I love playing the piano and the guitar and serving the worship team. To answer your question, Marcus, it has helped me a lot to be bold in my faith. So to share a background story, I was born and raised in Peru. And when I was in middle school, I was very immature. I did not like community service, so I would pretend to be sick to avoid helping kids. Later on in high school, I fell in love with music, guitar, drums, percussion, and my mom started a nonprofit. And I was wondering, like, Mom, why are you investing so much money and time building this nonprofit and use that money to buy me an electric guitar? And she's like, no, go and help volunteer and see that it is better to give than to receive, biblically speaking. And so I went and helped these kids get access to the internet with textbooks, and it completely changed my mind. I saw how kids with access to education can dream of becoming engineers, entrepreneurs, and so forth. And when I did my first startup when I was 19 at Stanford called Smiley Go, it was all about using AI and using software to help nonprofits match with companies. And so God completely changed my heart from being anti-serving, pretending to be sick, not wanting to help kids with HIV in Peru, to really using my calling that God has called me to be an entrepreneur, an unternehmen, to use technology for good and help many nonprofits in the US get many donations.
And so this, when you're now under high pressure, so when the whole health is positioned as a big influence in the world, so how do you do that as a Christian? How do you react? How you do that?
I think it's very important to really stand firm in your values. And as a Silicon Valley founder and entrepreneur, and I'm in a few boards, I'm pretty open about my values. I met Pat Gelsinger. He used to be the CEO of Intel, the semiconductor company, who's also very, very devout about his faith. And he taught me to be unabashedly passionate about my faith. Right? Like, we shouldn't be shameful to share our faith. And at least for me, I try to be like relational over transactional, Marcus. Many times here in places like Davos and the World Economic Forum, or in conferences like Forbes 30 under 30 or whatnot, people are so transactional. Like, people are like, give me your business card. What can I do for you? Ba, 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 bye. But for me, and what we learn in the Bible is, to be relational, to break bread with people. Even before, I think Paul talks about like breaking bread, sharing life before even sharing the gospel, right? And so I try to get to know people first as humans, as creatures of God, asking them questions about their family, asking them questions about their hobbies. And the craziest thing, Marcus, is that a lot of people here are so economically blessed, but they lack that relationship with Jesus, right? And so they're so poor that the only thing they have is money. And God places me in these places that I can meet them, and they're like, hey, actually, my daughter hasn't texted me in 6 months, or I'm going through my second divorce, or I'm addicted to this, or I'm vaping, I'm smoking, I'm doing this. And yes, they have a house in Hawaii, they have a house in Palo Alto, they have all these boats and yachts, but I'm like, life on earth is so short. And so my approach and my style in the Silicon Valley and in the world is to really focus on the long term and sharing with them how God has changed my heart from being a very selfish and arrogant teenager to really focusing on serving and paying it forward for the women of my village, of my mom's village in Pampas Grande. And that's what we do in Pam, Peru. We empower these women to become knitting entrepreneurs.
Wow, great. So how you face influenced your leadership style in decision-making processes, and probably you have an example of that where you say, okay, there my Christian faith really directed my decisions. Can you have you an example for us?
Yes. Number one, prayer. I think without prayer and God, of course, I'd be dead. I remember in high school, I applied to 10 colleges, the Harvards, the Stanfords, the Yales, all the good schools in the U.S. The first 9 rejected me. I was like crying in my room. I was 17. My dad, who's also Pedro, he was like, let's pray. Like, one is left. Like, God will open doors and God will close doors, right? Like how Job talks in chapter 1, like, blessed be the name of the God. Like, he gives, but he also takes away. And Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley was the last school to let me know if I got rejected or in. And it was crazy because I got rejected by other schools that were less selective. And in the end, not only did Berkeley open its doors, but gave me a lot of merit-based scholarships. And that's where I started my first company. And through Berkeley, I was taking multivariable calculus. Do we have any STEM or engineers or math people in the room? 3? Okay, 4 people. I was taking multivariable calculus. It was 8 a.m. And as a good Peruvian, I love to eat. And so rather than going to class, I went to the cafeteria. So bad. And I see this 80-year-old businessman wearing a suit and a tie and with gray hair. And my mom would always tell me, júntate con los mejores, con la gente más sabia, like, surround yourself with the wisest, with the best. And I approached this gentleman, and I'm like, hi, my name is Pedro Espinoza. What's yours? I'm Frank Baxter, he said. I'm like, Frank, why are you here? Everyone in the room is freshmen, 18-year-olds, you seem to be very important. He said, well, I'm on the board of trustees at Berkeley, and the board meeting got delayed, so I was hungry, and I didn't want to leave campus. And I was like, wow, I've never been a board of trustee of any university. I'm from Peru. I told him my story. And immediately I saw that Frank was wearing, those pins, those flags, a flag from the US and a flag from Uruguay. And I said, Frank, why are you wearing a Latin American, South American flag? He's like, well, I used to be the US ambassador to Uruguay under Bush, President Bush. And so we start speaking in Spanish, right? This 84-year-old and 18-year-old me, we connected over Spanish. And then I shared a bit about family values and church and traditional values. And he shared about him being, conservative and libertarian and very traditional and Christian. And we bonded over our values and over Spanish. A year and a half later, can you guess who was the first person to write a check and invest in Smiley Go? It was Frank Baxter, right? The ambassador to Uruguay, the board trustee, and the CEO of Jefferies. So what I want to share, Marcus, is embracing my faith and not being ashamed of believing, right, in Christ and believing the Bible and sharing those traditional values have helped me become more vulnerable, more approachable, and more connectable with people.
Thank you. So I heard that, one of your values really building up connections, building up relationship instead of, I don't know, try to take something from them or look for something. So are you also think that you have it, that you want to change something in other people and say, okay, I would help these people that they can change in their values? Or is it more that you say, oh, they should believe what they want and that's not my responsibility? Or do you have this tendency as well? And so how do you do that?
Excellent question. The Great Commission, we're called to make disciples, right, of all nations. And it's beautiful because in the Bible it says, make disciples, right? It doesn't necessarily say just share the gospel and grab a mic and talk it to 30,000 people. How do you make disciples? By doing one-on-ones, like discipleship, mentorship. Because when you spend quality time with the person, you get to know them, you can forgive them, you can love them, you can make mistakes, you can approach them. And so, yes, I am very passionate about, sharing God's love with people. But like I said before, I really want to get to know people first, rather than me saying oh, you're wrong, or because you believe in X, Y, and Z, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And going back to the example of Frank Baxter, one of the first questions I asked, I said, how can I help you? I never said, Frank, give me money or write a letter of accommodation or sponsor this. Can you imagine an 18-year-old kid from Peru asking the ambassador, how can he help him? He actually said yes. He was leading a Latin American civics seminar, and he wanted millennials and Gen Zs. And he's like, Pedro, I don't have, friends who are 19 or 20, 21, who are from Chile, Peru, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil. Do you have friends who are from those parts of the world? I was like, of course, all my friends from, football, soccer, and whatnot. And that's the point I want to share today is, yes, we're young, but age is just a number. You don't need a title to be a leader. And I was able to help Frank Baxter first, and he saw that genuine heart posture that later we developed that friendship, right? And later on, it took 18 months, a year and a half, where he wrote the first check to fund Smiley Go, my software company. And then he introduced me to other venture capitalists and angel investors. So like I said, it's really being relational over transactional that you will stand out. Because everyone in this world, people are tired of seeing fake people, of people who just want a business card and buy buy. Jesus was truly relational, right? He had 12 disciples, and even within the 12, he spent a lot of time with 3, right? With Peter, with James, and John, right? And so it's really important to believe in that one-on-one, that small group. And same for me, I have my own personal board of mentors and directors who I call and pray and cry and tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Thank you. So You are very energetic. You have a lot of energy. So where do you take it from? So what is your secret? What is your mystery? I mean, what stands behind this? Is it that you have spiritual life, spending time with God, church, family? Please, where do you take it from?
I have no kids.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Number one, joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. Galatians 5:22 and 23. Both my parents are, practicing devout Christians, and praise God that I was able to grow up in a house where my parents not only attended church, but like I said, served, shared the gospel in their own companies at work. Both my parents are entrepreneurs as well, and I grew up seeing my mom and my dad, bring the Bible and share it with people. My parents are from the mountains of Peru, 4,000 meters above sea level, super cold. And they went to public schools. And by God's grace, they started companies 40 years ago. My parents were 68. And they grew the companies. But I saw how their early employees, who used to be addicted to smoking or gambling or pornography or so many addictions, after my parents started sharing the gospel, they stopped smoking or drinking or whatnot. And so growing up in that environment, Marcus, really fueled my energy and love for God, because God is the only one who can change people, right? We can't change people. So yes, my energy comes from the Holy Spirit for sure. And you're so kind, because I'm actually a little sick. I had a bit of a sore throat. I spoke yesterday and I got here Saturday. I'm flying to Brazil in a few hours. So I just pray that, God is my healer, right? And so very kind. I'm at, 50% right now. But thank you for saying that I'm energetic.
Wow, 50%. So you can imagine what is 100%. Yeah, did you face public criticism? Or
Yeah, of course.
Do you have challenges? And
Yeah. So
How
many.
do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, my undergrad GPA at Berkeley was a 2.6, which is terrible. It's over 4 in the US. I failed many classes. I was doing my first startup at the time. And then God really opened doors for me to get into Stanford later and Harvard Business School, which I finished 2 years ago. When I did my first company, we had a lot of engineers, especially from the South Asia region. And of course, the 1040 window, I think I see it there, the lack of Christianity. I don't know if that's a specific map. But I felt a lot of criticism. So I had thank you. Yes, I love water. Thank you so much. I organized weekly Bible studies with my teammates. The co-founding team was 4 people: Jamie, Mila, and Jamie Rosenstein, Mila Vashtavu from Finland, and Joy. So sorry. Her Chinese name is Ting Chang. But anyway, and we had Bible studies every week. And we grew the company up to 38 teammates, employers. Of course, in the beginning, not everyone had the same beliefs. But then later, people thought that I was forcing people to come to the Bible studies. And I was never forcing anyone to pray. I was after work hours, whoever wants to stay to pray or do some worship, play some guitar, you can stay. So there were a lot of attacks, both spiritual and also blackmails and hate emails saying that I was racist or homophobic or whatnot. And I was no, I'm here to love and care for people. And yes, of course, I believe, in Jesus and the Trinity, and He is the truth, the way, and the life. But it's important to stand firm in your ground, right? One of my favorite verses is Galatians 1:10, that says that we're here to please God, right? We're not prisoners of men, but we're slaves to God, and we love Jesus, and He calls us friends. And so I really like to stand firm with that. Another trial that I've had, Marcus, and I'm pretty open about mental health, is my mom, Julia, has Parkinson's. And so it's a very, very tough disease. I don't know if you guys have any family members with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, but cognitive disabilities are tough. And I spent a lot of time flying to Peru, about 20% of my time. Last year, I got invited to speak at Davos, and I had to say no. My mom had the brain surgery, the DBS. So, yeah, there are many, many challenges as an entrepreneur. as an investor, but I think putting my faith in God and being vulnerable has enabled me to connect with people, for sure.
So, did you always have success when you start a business, or how many times you fail and how many times you succeed?
So many. So the second startup that I tried was called Scholar.com. It was a marketplace that connected high school students, mostly from China and India, to college students from Berkeley, Stanford, Harvard, and good universities. Because we thought that freshmen at Berkeley or Stanford or MIT working at a library making $20 an hour, we could pay them $200 an hour if they provide essay feedback to high schoolers in China who really want to go to a great school in the US. My co-founder is Chinese. He went to Princeton, and we did this for about a year. We got about to like 800, 900 users, but then we couldn't really scale it. And so, yeah, that was one failure. I like to call it failing forward. I think one thing that I love about the San Francisco Bay Area, even though it's like super crazy liberal and expensive, is that people really respect and cherish failure. Like if you don't have the multi-million-dollar exit, it's okay. Like it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay there, right? And so people saw that like, hey, this guy tried this idea for a year, like respect, like at least he tried. And so, yeah, that was like one complete failure. Another failure with Smiley Go in the beginning, big companies like IBM, like PepsiCo, wanted to try our software, our SaaS solution, software as a service, for free for 3 months, a pilot. And as a first-time founder and naive entrepreneur, I decided to give it away for free. I was allured by the big name of, Coca-Cola is using my software, Google, whatever. But little did I know that to convert an enterprise like Fortune 10 client from free user to paying customer takes months, if not like 12 months, like years, right? Because they have compliance, procurement, legal, like NDAs and everything. And so, yeah, that was another big failure. We had to lay people off. We didn't reach the revenue goals. Our investors were very, very upset. And it was hard. I remember crying at like 2 a.m., calling my parents, like praying. Like I said, the life really of a founder is the first 3 years is terrible. Like you need to find product market fit. And it's really hard. I think a lot of the times at conferences like WEF or Forbes 30 under 30 or whatever, people see people smiling and really celebrating success, but they don't see the founder behind the scenes, right? And that's where my church community in Palo Alto, at Stanford has helped me a lot, is just through prayer. We have a Slack group, and yesterday I posted like, hey guys, I have a sore throat. Please pray for me. I'm speaking tomorrow again. And I think just being vulnerable has helped me a lot, right? And in scripture, it says when we are weak, we are strong in him, right? So, yeah.
So what is your best advice to say when you are failed? What did you do? What is the best thing that helped? And probably also for us, what could help us when we failed?
I would say learn how to pivot. I love pivoting. By pivoting, I mean not only A/B testing, but BC testing, DC testing until X, Y, and Z testing. Another failure I wanted to share was I texted the wrong person. So, like many of us here, we attend conferences. And I had the business card of Ron Gonzalez. Ron was the mayor of San Jose, California, in the Bay Area. Like many of us, I had the business card, I had his phone number on my iPhone, but I wasn't BFFs, right? When you have like someone's email, whatever. My Bible study leader, Marcus, when I was 21, and Bansi Cariad, his initials were RG, Roger Gawi. He was Lebanese, Filipino. And Ron Gonzalez, the mayor, was also RG. And so one day I texted the wrong Ron, like the wrong person. It's like, hey man, when are we having the Bible study and church barbecue? I'm going to buy chicken wings from Costco and do this and that. And Ron, the mayor, replied with the text. I still have the screenshot with the question mark. I was like, oh. He's going to think I'm weird. He's going to think like whoever goes to church anymore, like, you know, like California's like super like anti-church and whatever. But I took advantage of this failure to create a conversation with Ron Gonzalez, the mayor. I was like, so sorry, you have the same initials as my church leader. Do you exercise? Because I mentioned, you know, like, let's go to church and work out after. Like, do you go to church? Do you meditate? A lot of people now meditate. And he actually opened up. He was like, yeah, I'm Catholic. He goes to mass. He hikes the dish at Stanford. And so we started this texting conversation. And in the end, I got a coffee appointment, a coffee date with him in San Jose at Starbucks. And in less than a year, can you guess who was the first independent board director, like board member at Smiley Go? It was Ron, the mayor of San Jose. And then a year later, when we got Google, Dropbox, and San Jose Water Company to join as users for a software company, can you guess who made that warm introduction to Dropbox, to San Jose Water, to Google? Of course, Ron Gonzalez, because he was the mayor of Silicon Valley, right? So it's like failing forward, iterating, not giving up, deploying. And then 3 years later, when I was 24, I met my co-author, Jorge Tittinger, who went to Stanford as well. And I met him through Ron Gonzalez, the mayor, because I asked Ron, do you know any other Peruvians in Silicon Valley? And he was like, I know one other Peruvian. His name is Jorge. He could be your dad, and he went to Stanford. And so with Jorge, we wrote a book, 2 books, Differences That Make a Difference and The Real ROI. Like I said, it's really not giving up. It's really asking for help, trying a different strategy, and just being open. You know, I told Ron, like, hey, I want to meet other Peruvians. The Bay Area, California is next to Mexico. Like, most Latinos are Mexicans. I want to meet other Peruvians. He's like, I know one other Peruvian. And he connected me to my co-author.
So my last question to you before they can ask you. So what kind of advice do you give us as young generation to become leaders with influence?
Wonderful question. I would say 1, build your personal board of sponsors and mentors. Does anyone here know what the difference is between a sponsor and a mentor? No? Okay, so a mentor is someone more like an advisor who gives her or his advice. A sponsor is like a coach. A sponsor is someone who has the skin in the game, who's wearing your t-shirt when you're not there. In the boardroom, in the hiring room, in the promoting room, who's saying like, hey, I know Marcus, he's a great software engineer, let's promote him to, you know, director of engineering or like manager of engineering, right? Or like, I know Pedro, like he's an awesome entrepreneur, let's promote him to this. And the vast majority, at least in the US, right? The vast majority of like immigrants and sometimes like, you know, Peruvians, obviously, such a small country, or women tend to be over-mentored, yet under-sponsored, right? Like people love, and especially younger generations like us, like they love giving us advice. It's easy to give advice, right? But they rarely sponsor you or use their social capital for you. And I'll give you one example. Pat Gelsinger, the Christian CEO, former CEO of Intel, he spoke at the Silicon Valley prayer breakfast in San Francisco like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I remember at the time I was attending his speech. I was like, wow, he's such a cool guy. I want to be like him when I grow up. He finished his speech, and there was like 25 people wanted to get a picture with him. And as a good Peruvian, I was so hungry and thirsty. So I was like, I'm just going to eat Brazilian steak. I love Brazilian steak. And then I'll figure out a way. Like God will provide for me to meet with Pat Gelsinger. And I bought his book on Amazon, The Juggling Act. It's a great book if you haven't read it, The Juggling Act by Pat Gelsinger. And I read it in like 5 hours. And the next day I emailed Pat. I didn't know his email. So I emailed like 10 emails. Like pat@intel.com, like g@vmware.com, Gelsinger. You get the gist. 9 bounced, 1 went through. He replied at like 5 a.m. because yes, Fortune 500 CEOs wake up at 4 a.m. every day. It's crazy. And he was like, Pedro, I would love to meet you for coffee at like 6 a.m., you know, next Tuesday. At the time, I was living in Concord, Pleasant Hill, which is like East Bay of San Francisco. He was in Palo Alto. It's like an hour with no traffic. Bay Area traffic is terrible, worse than Davos. Of course, Davos is so small. And I woke up. I like drove. I was like, have a sleep. And I was very grateful. Little did I know that Pat, his daughter, adopted a Hispanic, like a Latino foster kid, like a son, orphan. And Pat was also learning like Spanish and like Chinese and loved learning different languages. I love learning different languages as well. And we bonded over so many things. And then later I moved to like Redwood City, the area where he lives with his wife. And we just started this genuine friendship and just mentorship. And as a matter of fact, next week he's coming to Stanford to speak to Chi Alpha, which is part of Assemblies of God, like a Christian fellowship that I'm an advisor, to share his testimony with students, with Stanford undergrads and graduate students. So like I said, it's really embracing that it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. It's really building your personal board of mentors and sponsors, and it's really being approachable and vulnerable. I think the more down to earth you are, the more you can connect to people. And you would be surprised, the most like quote unquote like cool or impressive people I've ever met have been the most like down to earth. And what I mean by these is like people like Pat Gelsinger or people like Theresa May. I met her last night, the former Prime Minister of the UK. Like, they're people in the end. Like, they have kids or they have a wife, or, well, unlike me, I have no wife and no kids. But like, they have they have like a mom and a dad, and like I can ask them about their testimonies or like what makes them them rather than their job, right? So it's important to really see people as creatures of God and then approach them from a relational perspective.
Wow, it was very good. Thank you very much.
Of course.
And now it would be the time that you can raise questions, and so please feel free. If there are some questions, then please raise your hand.
Hello, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us.
What's your name?
My name is Hugh. I'm from Canada, and I'm a student at the School of Biblical Christian Worldview under YWAM
Which city in Canada?
in Langley, which is close to Vancouver. So, yeah, in British Columbia. My question is then to you as a successful entrepreneur such as yourself, but also as a devout Christian, how would you say what was a kind of like the missing component for younger Christians or just for regular people in general to find success in a very high technological or very high competitive field in North America, but also in the world? And what would you say is like, how would you kind of elaborate more on the relational part and aspect of like how that kind of translates into success, both materialistically but also spiritually? And what would you have to say for the younger generation towards that? It's a very big, long question, but
Your question is, what's the missing component of the younger generation to be successful in tech?
in tech, but also just like in relationships in general.
Okay. That's a good question. I would say living in like the AI era that everything now is like LLMs and agents and scripts and for loops and while loops and just crypto. A lot of younger folks and us, we lack soft skills. And by soft skills, I mean empathy. I mean listening. I mean reading. I mean patience. And I say this like preaching to myself. Many times I'm not that patient. And it's important to really focus on like emotional intelligence or cultural intelligence. That's what I like to call it these days, because that's going to help you stand out. Like everyone at a major city like Vancouver, San Francisco, New York, Toronto, most people are smart and most people work hard. But what's going to differentiate you from the rest, in my opinion, it's always been like your story, your brand, and also the soft skills, right? Like by God's grace, and I really say this, thank God that He opened doors for me to go to Berkeley and then Stanford. Everyone there like works super hard and like studies all day and like they speak like 6 languages or whatever. But I think for me, God enabled me to really embrace my vulnerability, but also to deliver the mentorships that I had. So I'll give you one example. In 2021, I joined the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. It's a company founded by David Packard from HP, Hewlett Packard. And the CEO 5 years ago was Christian, Carl Guardino. And through the board of Silicon Valley Leadership Group, I met a gentleman called Bill Coleman. And for those of you who remember back in the 90s, Oracle acquired BEA Systems, and Bill was the founder of BEA, like Bill was the B of BEA Systems. And very successful Catholic, like Irish entrepreneur CEO. And at the time I was doing my company, my Smiley Go, and Bill gave me a few tips on go-to-market strategy. And he was like, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this, like, talk to this person. And so we would meet every 3 months, grab breakfast in Los Altos at Rick's Cafe, great cafe. And he would always give me like strategic advice. Later in that relationship, he would see like, okay, like Pedro, good job. Like you did this, like you followed up, like you did this. And so it took years to build that trust. I think many times younger people like us, we think that it takes like a day or a week or 6 months to gain the trust from a mentor, from a pastor, from a CEO, but it doesn't really work that way. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's not my quote, from Bill McDermott, and he's on my second book, and he's here at Davos. Bill is the CEO of ServiceNow, and he says, to build trust, it's like droplets of water from a bucket. And to break trust, it's as easy as pushing the bucket and right? So it's very important to build trust. And having these soft skills and being patient will help you.
Thank you very much. Another question? Okay. Yes, Seema?
Hi, my name is Seema. My question, what are your thoughts on, do you still build a sponsorship, or what are your strategy to find sponsor for your business? Because no business can stand on its own. You need people who are supporting you, who are believing in you. So would you like to share your strategy?
Seema, correct? Yeah. So my strategy for gaining sponsors. It's a great question. I tend to focus on a story because people remember stories rather than a fact or a number. And so when I'm pitching BAM Peru, which is BAM Peru USA, the nonprofit I lead, is I share them the story of the little kids like Diego, Andreita, Juanita, of them pre-BAM Peru, right? With no library, with no computer lab. They just wanted to stay in farming. Nothing wrong with farming, it's great. But after they had access to computer lab and library, they want to go to civil engineering or computer science or law school. And so sharing a story makes it very, very compelling. So when I'm meeting potential donors for my NGO, I try to memorize and become a student of them, Seema. So my mom taught me this. In my contact books in my iPhone, when I meet someone, I try to remember things of them, like their favorite football club is Real Madrid, or like their birthday is, December 1st, or they're Jewish, or, they're Christian or Muslim, or, their kid goes to Yale. And so every year, if, Real Madrid wins the Champions League, I send her a text and be like, congrats, your team won. And so it might be silly, but people remember these small details. It might be super silly, but I'm a big fan of like handwritten notes and like Merry Christmas. So every year I have a list of my board members and sponsors, and then I send them, and it's a good opportunity to preach the gospel too, right? Like Merry Christmas, and like I send them an alpaca beanie or a sweater from the women that I help in the mountains of Peru. And so you're building this friendship and you're building cadence with your sponsors, right? And so they're not like, oh, Seema only talks to me when she's asking for money, but she's a genuine human being. Like she actually cares about my daughter who's in college, or she actually cares about, my favorite cricket team or whatever, it's really being a student of them. And when you see them, at least when I see my, mentors and friends and sponsors like Pat, like Rosemary, I try to remember like, hey, how's your granddaughter doing? Or like, hey, how can I help you? Another story that I always share is with Rosemary. So got invited to speak at Berkeley for a scholarships award luncheon. And the fear of public speaking is real. The president of the university was like, can we have any students say thank you to the donors? No one raised their hand. Like 300 students, and no one wanted to say thank you, give a speech. So I raised my hand, I shared my, Peru story. I was 18. And after my speech, an old lady, she was 85, approached me. She's like, I love your joy. Like, I want to get to know you better. I'm a donor at the university. And I'm like, what's your name? She's like, Rosemary. And she's like, I would love to treat you to play golf at my country club. Do you golf? In my mind, Sima, I was like, no. I didn't grow up in Peru at a country club. It's like $100,000 to get into the admittance fee. But I switched. I took this challenge, this problem, as an opportunity to learn. I said, no, Rosemary, but can you teach me how to golf? Can you mentor me? And I'll go. She said, yes. Next Tuesday at 8 a.m. tea time. Next thing I do, I go to my dorm. I text everyone like, hey guys, can anyone lend me a golf hat, the gloves, the clubs? Went to Walmart, bought the cheapest like immigrant hustle kind of thing. And at the golf course with Rosemary, she introduced me to her cousin who actually is from Germany. And so I got to practice a bit of my broken German with her. And then she introduced me to her son who was an executive at Adobe. 4 years later, can you guess what was the first tech company that hosted my first book talk? Adobe, right? So it's like relationships, and not forgetting, not burning bridges, because you never know if she or he will, have a son or dad or mom or whatever that's going to help you in the end. So it's important to really bless and care for people.
Thank you. So we take a last question. So the last chance for you to raise a question. Kurdin.
Hi, my name is Kurdin. And I wonder, you seem like a very busy man, like lots of things on your plate probably. And I wonder, how do you make time for a project like writing a book when you have a company and a nonprofit and all of this? So how do you manage all of the workload that you can still have time for pioneering new things?
Thank you, Regime. Right?
Kurdin.
Gudin.
Curdin.
Gudin. Where are you from?
Like an hour away from here.
Oh,
yeah.
I love Switzerland.
Thank you. Me too.
And I love Federer. I love tennis, by the way. If anyone wants to play tennis, I play like every week. Great question. So yes, no one does it alone. That's another thing I learned early in university or in the Bay Area. Everyone has a team. Literally, like you look at successful people like Bill Gates. His dad was a very successful attorney, right? Like people sometimes say like, oh, like he was a genius, did everything by himself. No. Like Mark Zuckerberg, of course, great genius guy, but like he had co-founders. Like no one does it alone, literally. Or at least, well, of course, Jesus is God, but like anyway. And so, no, I have a great team. I have like a chief of staff. I have an EA, a personal assistant. I could not survive without them. I'm big into family. I have two older sisters, Karina and Diana. Karina went to Stanford. She's a doctor, and Diana went to Fuller Seminary, and she then got accepted to Oxford. And so for me, my sisters were my mentors and like role models. When I was 12, Diana shared the gospel in 12-year-old lexicon diction, because like when you read the Bible, like King James, at least in Spanish, Reina Valera, it's like very archaic. And so Diana was very loving to translate the gospel as a kid, and my sisters helped me so much. This week, for example, having a schedule and people who like plan my one-on-one meetings helped me a lot. I think sports has helped me. I'm big into tennis and swimming and soccer and volleyball. And through these sports, I've been able to just get to know people as people. And when I say people, like these are venture capitalists, these are CEOs, like university presidents in California. But when you're playing tennis with them, like it's like any sport, you level the playing field, right? You forget about, oh, she's the dean or he's the president or whatever. And I have a virtuous circle that I call it, Gurdin, right? That the same companies that I interview their CEOs for my books, like the Dells, the Googles, the Netflixes, are the same companies that fund Pamperu, my NGO, my nonprofit, and are the same companies that hire me as a keynote speaker, and are the same companies that their executives and mid-managers are the board members of Pamperu USA. So you get it, right? Like, and yes, you're right. I am involved in like too many things, to be honest, in boards, but I tend to mix everything together because if not, I wouldn't sleep and wouldn't have a personal life. Like I told Marcus, I go to Peru a lot. My mom has Parkinson's and I spend a lot of time with her. For me, family is a blessing and we only have one dad and one mom. Ellie, my girlfriend from Stanford, helps me so much. She's been a blessing. We've been dating for like 4 months. And I really try to have discipline in having a schedule. My mom and dad did a great job. Never did caffeine. I've never tried coffee, like no alcohol, no TV as a kid. It was crazy. And I'm lactose intolerant, which is perfect because I don't even like dessert. Like I don't even drink like ice cream or whatever. And so like all these like weird things of like having a schedule, Gurdine, have helped me to say no and have a very disciplined lifestyle. Because the more, when you say no to something, you say yes to something else, right? And I don't say this to condemn, partying or whatever. I'm a sinner, but the fact that like, I've been a very boring person. It's true. I was not cool in high school or middle school. I was a nerd. In college, I like was doing startups. Like the fact that I was weird in those ways and missed class and didn't party or frat life or whatever enabled me to have a lot of free time. Because if you look at my schedule, really like, it's like church, I serve at worship team at church in Stanford, Chi Alpha, piano, I sing, play the guitar, sports, work, and I play tennis and golf with venture capitalists, with CEOs. So like I tend to combine everything, so it doesn't really feel like work. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's just saying no to things and being disciplined.
Thank you so much, Pedro. I seen you somebody who's really seeing the people, remember the name, and you answer the question to the people, not just answering the question. It's so great that you came to us to speak to us, and I think he received a big applause from us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I wish I brought copies of my book. I brought like 20, but I got here 4 days ago and I ran out, but so sorry.
But they are available on
Amazon, Barnes
Amazon,
& Noble, Kindle.
Yeah. So can you give what's the name of the book?
The first one is Differences That Make a Difference. And the second one is The Real ROI. I'm happy to give you guys my business card, but on LinkedIn, feel free to add me and happy to, if anyone plays tennis, let me know. Or table tennis, tisch tennis. I love ping pong as well. And I love learning languages. If you guys want to teach me language, and I really mean this. It's funny, like I spoke at Ford in Michigan or General Motors, and there was like a tennis person, then after we played tennis. So I really actually mean it. I love sports. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We are really inspired, and I think probably you are inspired to say, I want to become a teacher like he. Like you was once inspired. Or I think we all have the potential to become leaders with influence. So we could see and hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
and
Marcus.
here we have a little gift, a chocolate from Switzerland for you.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much. So thank you very much for attending the seminar, and we will have our next forum tomorrow, 2 o'clock here with Joel Wuadan. He is from the Swiss Leadership Group, the leader of the Swiss Leadership Group. So it's really inspiring. So please have this in your agenda, and we see us tomorrow morning or afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.